Welcome to Advanced Warehouse Management. We're going to do a day in the life involving the outbound processing side of the warehouse. Some of you were here for the session we had just prior to lunch where we covered the inbound side. So we're going to be covering a number of things today. But first, let me introduce myself. My name is Jason Reed. I'm a senior escalation engineer within our support organization. Focused on supply chain areas of Dynamics AX for around the last 12 years. The past 2 years I've been pretty heavily focused on the warehouse management side of things. I've worked with ERP now for approximately 20 years, all on manufacturing and distribution operations. So, like I said, what we'll be covering today is the outbound processes for warehouse management. Some of the topics that we're going to cover today, first of all, we're going to talk about the warehouse layout. We'll talk about locations within the warehouse, how we can group those locations together as zones, and then use those zones to control where inventory is pulled from. In addition to that, we'll talk about some of the storage strategies around fixed stocking limits, fixed locations for items, and volumetrics. Once we've completed the layout discussion, we'll talk a little bit about outbound processing. And some of the setup that's required for outbound processing includes, first of all, work templates. And so when we're looking at work templates today, what you want to do is think of work templates as the steps that are required in order to get a shipment out the door. Okay? So I have to pick it up from somewhere, I have to put it down somewhere, and I have to complete various steps to get it on the truck and out to my customer. We'll talk about location directives, and when you're thinking about location directives, think of them as the tool that we use to control where we're going to pull inventory from and where we're going to put it within our warehouse after we've pulled it. We'll talk about the mobile device menu items, which is really a way of defining how the user will interact with the warehouse management solution, what options they may see, how the system will behave, and what they can do with the system. And we're going to cover a concept called work audit templates. That's a fairly powerful tool that you can use to trigger certain events to occur once work is completed. Once we covered those topics, we're going to get into demand-based replenishment. In the prior session, we spent a very limited amount of time on min-max replenishment. So if we have time today, in this second session, I may come back to that and talk about the concept of min-max replenishment as well. You'll understand what replenishment is all about when we get into the warehouse layout discussion, but essentially what we're doing is we're moving inventory from the larger parts of our warehouse to the smaller parts of our warehouse so that the picking operations can be more efficient. Okay? So we're taking smaller quantities from the bigger locations and putting them into smaller locations so that workers don't have to move as far to perform their picks. We'll talk about the purpose. We'll talk about how you can configure replenishment templates in various ways to control the behavior of replenishment. And again, location directives tell us where to get stuff, where to put it. Work templates tell us what we have to do. And mobile device menu items tell us what the system will look like when we're interacting with it. Okay, so let's have a brief discussion of warehouse layout. This is just a high-level, very simple warehouse layout that I put together for this presentation. And if you look at the way this is structured, in the lower left-hand corner, we have a receiving docks. And you see some inventory sitting at those receiving docks. You see a truck backed up to those receiving docks. And eventually that inventory needs to get off the receiving dock and put into our bulk storage or our picking locations. Okay? So depending on how I can configure the system, I'm going to move inventory from those receiving docks to one of two places, the bulk storage and or the picking area. Now when you look at that receiving docks, we see that we have two receiving docks, and they're within a zone. They have a common zone. That square around the receiving docks indicates that it's a common zone. Same with the bulk storage racks. We see that we have multiple racks all within the bulk storage zone. In addition to that, we have our picking area. That's within our picking area zone. and we have a conveyor. So the idea here is that once I've put inventory into my bulk storage locations, if I have a demand that I cannot fulfill from my pick face, my picking area, then I want to trigger replenishment to move inventory from the bulk storage racks to the picking area so that I can ship the orders that have come in for the day. My process for picking them is to essentially take goods off the shelf, put them on the conveyor belt, send them down the line to the packing stations that you see in the lower right-hand corner. And notice that those are represented by a couple of PC terminals. Okay, so the packing station functionality in warehouse management isn't done through the mobile device, it's done through a PC terminal. So I'm going to show you how that behaves. Once we've completed that, the packing, put everything into the box, needs to be sent over the shipping dock and put on a truck so it can be delivered to our customer. Okay. So that's a real high-level overview of our warehouse layout that we're going to be going through today. So now I'm going to demo how you set that up in AX. The first thing we're going to look at is our warehouse setup. So under warehouse management, setup, warehouse setup, and warehouses. We're going to be working with Warehouse 24. And one of the key functions that you see under the Warehouse Management Fast tab is this Use Warehouse Management Processes checkbox. Okay. So in order to use these functions that we're going to be going through today, you need to make sure that you have that marked. Okay. In addition to that, there's some other key options I want to highlight in here. One of them is the default inventory status ID. So as part of warehouse management, if you were in the earlier session, we talked about the fact that we added some dimensions to the storage group. We added two dimensions. One's called inventory status and one's called license plate. Inventory status tells us whether the inventory is available or not. License plate is a way of grouping items into a common dimension. Okay, so think of a license plate as a box, a pallet, a tub, any number of things where you have items within something. If you're used to WMS2 in AX prior to R3 and AX7, think of pallet ID. Okay. Now, in addition to that, one of the key functions on the outbound side is reservations. We've introduced a new concept called reservation hierarchies that I'm going to get into in a moment. But there's two settings here under reservations. Reserve inventory at load posting and reserve when orders are released by a batch job. Okay. So let me bring up a reservation hierarchy, and these are each item in the system is assigned to a reservation hierarchy. So under inventory, reservation hierarchy, we assign these hierarchies to our items. And really what we're saying here is at what level do we want to reserve inventory? If you're familiar with AX from prior to R3, when we reserved inventory, we reserved to the most granular level possible. Right? We'd choose a specific serial number at a specific location, and now you're locked down. If you don't remove that reservation, you can't move stuff around the warehouse. Okay? So what we've done here is we've opened that up and we've said, okay, at what level do we want to reserve inventory? And the answer to that question when we look at this form is for any item assigned to the batch reservation hierarchy, we are reserving to the site, warehouse, and inventory status level. Okay? So we'll choose a specific site when we reserve, we'll choose a specific warehouse, and we'll choose a specific status. If I click on the batch above hierarchy, we see that batch number is now above the location in the list. So that indicates to me that we're going to reserve a specific batch when we reserve inventory. Okay? So when the worker goes into the warehouse, he has to get the right batch, and the location directives will control based on where that batch resides in the system. Okay. Now, as you look at this, it looks pretty flexible. It's not that flexible. What you can do is determine whether batch or serial number is above location or not. You can't put status below location. You can't put license plate above location. Okay? You're very limited in terms of what you can actually do with this form. Okay. But that's key, because what you need to understand is that in order to release an order to the warehouse so that workers can go pick it and get it out the door, you must first reserve that inventory. Okay? If you haven't reserved the inventory, then you can't release it. So the question then becomes, when do you want to release it? Okay? Now, I personally, I'm a firm believer in postponing reservations to the last minute. Okay? No point in reserving inventory until you know you're going to actually be working on that. Okay? You can still use manual reservations on sales orders. You can still use automatic reservations on sales orders. Or you can set up the system to automatically do the reservation when you release to the warehouse. Okay? And this is where you do that. It's reserved when orders are released by a batch job. Now, the status that we're reserving to is this default inventory status. Okay? So that's our warehouse configuration. But we also have to define our locations within the warehouse. So if I go under Inventory Inquiries, Inventory Locations, I see a list of locations within my warehouse. If you look at each of these locations, they each have a location ID, they have a location profile, and they may have a zone ID. And when we were looking at the PowerPoint, we saw we had our zones laid out. We had a bulk area, a picking area, etc. Each of those would be a zone in the system. Okay? But there might also be a location profile. And that location profile controls a lot of things. So for instance, if we look at our bulk storage locations, we see how it's going to behave. One of the key things that you see here is that use license plate tracking is not marked. Okay? So each item can have a license plate, but you can also have a blank license plate. Okay? There's a couple of exceptions to that rule. Okay? 3 areas where you must have a license plate, 3 locations, types of locations where you must have a license plate. The receiving dock, the shipping dock, packing station, and the 4th one, I guess, would be the user locations. Okay? So you're going to have to define license plates for those locations. But other than that, if you don't want license plates in your picking area, but you do want to have license plates in your bulk area, you can do that. Okay, okay, we also see that we have this option called Allow Mixed Inventory Statuses. So that ties back to the inventory status, and when we reserve our inventory, we reserve at the default status. We can also choose whether we allow mixed items or force it to have 1 item per location. The location types that are going to require license plates are going to be your default shipping locations, your receiving locations, your packing station, and your user locations. So when I pick something up, when I pick this up, it's now on my user location. The question was, does the location format serve any purpose other than when you use the wizard? And the short answer to that is no. It's a way of building your location list. There's also this generate check digit option. Okay, so we have the ability in AX to say we can generate a check digit for our locations. And that's just a random number that the workers have no idea what it is. It's only printed as a barcode on the location label. Okay? It's a way of making sure that when those guys go out and say they're at location 123, they're actually at location 123 because they have to scan that check digit. Okay. 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 In addition to that, on our items, we can define our fixed locations. So you have a couple of options. You can have a dynamic warehouse where any item can go in any location, or you can have a semi-dynamic warehouse where some items have to go into a certain zone, or you can be really locked down and say a specific SKU is tied to a specific location. Okay? So if you want to lock it down, that's done under warehouse setup. and actually fixed locations. So what I've done for my demo is I'm working with a couple of items for this demo, and that's our 6-foot HDMI cable and our 12-foot HDMI cable. Okay. And then you notice that A0001 has location CP1 and CP3, both as fixed locations for this item. And we see that it has that A0002 goes to CP02 only. So that's where we say what the fixed locations are. Now those are only going to be relevant if we make use of them in our location directives. So we're going to get into that configuration here in a bit. But before we do, let me take you through location stocking limits. So if we look under Warehouse Management Setup, Warehouse Setup, Location Stocking Limits, we see that we can define our stocking limits in a number of ways. We can define the stocking limit by location. We can define by location/item. We can define by location profile. Okay, so what we've done here, it just so happens that those CP01 and CP02, CP03 item locations, are all tied to location profile web shop. Okay. So what have I done here? I've said web shop can only accept one max. Okay. Now you can use any unit of measure that you want, right? You could use pallets, you could use pieces, you could use eaches, kilos, whatever, right? The reason I'm choosing max is I just want to illustrate how this will behave once we start talking about replenishment. Okay. So now that we've gone through and talked about this warehouse setup, really all we've done is we've defined, what are our locations within the warehouse, what statuses do we want to make use of, and what are the, how do we want to have locations behave in terms of what items can be in them, what statuses can be in them, etc. So now let's talk a little bit about outbound processing and how we can configure outbound processing in AX. Earlier on, I described what each of these means or what each of these does, but I'll do it again. Work templates define what steps are required in order to complete a process. Right? In order to ship my goods, what do I have to do? Location directives define where do I go to complete that process. Mobile devices menu items tell us how things behave. And work audit templates allow us to trigger additional functions to occur when we perform this process. Okay. So let's take a look at some of that configuration. Okay, so let's start with work templates. So under Setup, Work Templates, the first thing we choose when this comes up is our work order type. Right? Earlier today, if you were in the first session, we used work order type purchase orders. But now we're doing outbound, so we're going to use work order type sales orders. And if you stick around for the next session that Tim will be involved in, you'll see some production stuff. So I just want to highlight a few of the things that we're doing here with these work templates. I only have one work template for my outbound process in this warehouse. And the first thing I do is I define when this should apply. Right now I have it set as sequence number 0, right? So any sales order that gets released, the first work template it's going to look at is this one, right? If this one doesn't match, it'll go on to 1. If that one doesn't match, it'll go on to 2, so on and so forth. But we control when this one will apply by going to Edit Query. So one of the key things you need to think about when you're setting this up is that you want to have your most granular work templates at the top of the grid. They should have a lower sequence number. The broader ones should be lower down. But this query is essentially saying this will only apply excuse me, if my warehouse is 24 and my location begins with CP. Okay? So this work template cannot be used to pick from anywhere else in my warehouse except locations that begin with CP. Now I could also restrict on location, profile, web shop, whatever I want to do. Oops. In addition to that, I can choose my work pool ID. Now the reason I chose that work pool ID, it's going to make more sense later, but really what we're going to see when we set up our mobile device is that we want to have the ability to group by a work pool. So imagine, if you will, I have multiple work templates for Warehouse 24. Well, I can break them up by zone using our work pool. Right? I can say pulling from bulk uses work pool bulk. Okay? So that's why I've done that. So we've defined when it applies. In addition to that, we need to define what we do. Now this is very simple. What we're doing in this case is we're picking it up from a picking location and we're putting it down at the packing station. Okay? If I wanted to introduce additional steps, I certainly could, but I'd need to have additional work class IDs. So I could say pick and choose work class ID SO pick, and then say put SO pick, and my directive code will be stage. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move these up So here's what I'm doing. With this configuration, what I'm saying is that the first step is to pick the goods. Okay? Now I'm going to put them down in a staging location. And once they've been put down into a staging location, I need to pick them back up and deliver them to the packing station. Okay? Now the way this is set up right now, what would actually happen is I would go out, I'd scan it, pick it up, put it down, and it would immediately tell me to pick it back up and take it somewhere else, which is kind of stupid, right? So if I want to do that in a more intelligent way, I would mark this stop work flag. I would mark this stop work flag. And what that's going to do is say, okay, somebody else is going to perform the sales step. Okay? Worker A does SO pick, worker B does sales. I'm going to go ahead and put that back to normal because I don't have staging locations defined, but you get the point. Okay?
Sorry. So you had it stop before. So does the line number 3 with the stop work? So it would stop before the processing line.
Right, exactly. Yep. You put the stop on the next pick, basically. There's also a concept called work breaks. Okay? So the way you get to work breaks, the first thing you have to do is define in your query a sort option. And what a work break does is it allows you to say, create a separate work ID every time this field changes. Okay? So if the field here changes, then do a work break. But that only happens if you set the edit query with a sort and then go to work breaks and mark the group by this field. Okay? I'm not doing that because I'm making use of work pools for that purpose. Okay? All right. Any questions on work templates? Yep. 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 So that's a good question. So the question was, if I define a stop and I put the goods down in the staging location, how does the worker know that he needs to take it out of the staging location and put it somewhere? Well, the short answer to that is because it's sitting in the staging location, right? It's physically sitting there. So what that worker's actually going to do is he's going to see it sitting in the staging location. He's going to do whatever has to be done in the staging location. Scan the license plate that's on it, and that'll immediately tell him where it needs to go. Okay? So there should be a license plate label on those staging locations for that purpose. The other option is to use a separate mobile device menu item that makes use of system directed or system grouping. So it just says, hey, here's the stuff that has to happen in the staging area of the warehouse. Okay. Yes?
So is that where you like consider, I guess, quality control stuff?
Yeah, if you wanted to have a quality control step that would allow you to move inventory from the staging location to somewhere else, if you find that it's bad inventory with a different status perhaps, you could do that. Yep. I'm going to take you through that in just a moment. So the question was, for those on the recording, is that how do we define the sort order of the locations for picking purposes? So I'll show that in a little bit when we get into location directives. Yeah. Yes? The reason I chose work pool is because I like work pools. And the reason I like work pools is that it allows the user, instead of having a different mobile device menu item, he goes to one mobile device menu item and he just says, where am I? Right? So if I'm in the web shop, I'm going to see web shop work. If I'm in the bulk area, I'm going to see bulk work. The alternative is have a different mobile device menu item pointing to different work classes, etc., and it's going to control it. Right. Okay. All right. So we've got our work template discussed. The next thing we want to talk about is our location directives. So work defined what we have to do in our outbound process. This is going to define where we have to go in our outbound process. So again, our work order type is sales order. I'm going to filter on warehouse 24. That was not what I wanted to do. I will filter on warehouse 24. Yeah, Control G. Okay. So in this case, I've got 4 location directives for sales orders at warehouse 24. I've got 24 SO pick, 24 SO cluster pick, and 2 puts to the packing station. How do I know it's to the packing station? I know through that directive code. So if you'll remember back on the work template, the put had a directive code of pack. Okay? So when it goes through and determines where it has to go, it's going to look for a location directive that has this directive code. Okay? Now, why do I have 2 of them? I've got 24 SO put, and I've got 24 SO put mixed. Well, if I'm putting more than one item on the same work ID to my packing station, I need to have that location directive marked as multiple SKU. Okay? If I'm having one, if I'm only putting one at the packing station, I need to have it unmarked. Okay? So having multiple SKU marked is not inclusive of single SKU operations. Okay? You need to have both. It's kind of weird, but you do. Okay? What's the difference between 24 SO pick, 24 SO cluster pick? I'm only going to use that 24 SO pick, and it's really just controlled by whether or not the origin of the order, in this case, is INET. So if the order comes in through INET, I follow one process. If it comes in through the phone, I follow another process. Okay. So the first thing it's going to do is go up, when I release an order to the warehouse, is look for a location directive that applies to that order, right? If it's not an INET order, it's going to see that sequence number 1 applies. Okay. The next thing it has to do is determine if any of the lines on that location directive apply. Okay. So now in looking at location directive 1, sequence line number 1, We see that it only applies if the quantity is between 1 and 100,000, and we have restrict by unit marked. Okay? So because we have restrict by unit marked, the restrict by unit button appears. This only applies to full pallets of inventory. So if I'm shipping a full pallet, I don't want to go over to the picking area and grab 100 units out of the picking area and then have to replenish it again later. I just want to go get a pallet, right? So in that case, what I'm saying is that if I'm shipping a full pallet, then go over to the location directive actions for that line and see what locations apply. And in this case, it's only location profile bulk. Okay. If that one doesn't work, it'll look at sequence number 2. I don't have restrict by unit, so then it'll say, all right, it says from floor here, but it's not really from floor, it's from web shop. It's using a fixed location usage of only fixed locations for the product. Okay? So I showed you earlier that my 2 items, A0001 and A0002, are pointing to CP01, 02, and 03 in my warehouse, right? So if this one applies, it's only going to use that. One other thing to make note of, if you're selling batch-enabled items that you have batches on, you need to have batch-enabled marked on that location directive. If you have some items that are batch-enabled and some items that are not batch-enabled, you need to have one line that has it marked and one line that doesn't have it marked. Okay? So unmarked isn't included in marked. Okay. Questions on location directives? Yes.
What happens in the scenario where it's not picked up by any of your directives?
It's an excellent question. So what happens if none of your location directives apply? Okay, one of 2 things can happen, right? One is if you've set up replenishment, demand-based replenishment that you're going to see later, it can automatically move that inventory to the appropriate location so that you can eventually pick it. Okay? The other option is to have, if you don't have that set up, if you have location directive failures enabled on sales orders, it just won't create the work. Okay? If you don't have location directive failures enabled on sales orders, it'll create the work with a blank location. Okay? So it just kind of depends. Now, if you, let's say you have location directive failures enabled, right? And let's say you're releasing to the warehouse and you have plenty of inventory in the available status at the warehouse level. Okay? But you don't have anything available at the picking locations. Okay? What's going to happen? Right? It'll release it to the warehouse, which means it'll create a shipment. Okay? Then it'll try to allocate that shipment, but it won't find inventory, so it'll fail. It'll drop that shipment off the wave, and now you have something you have to manage. Okay? You have to manage that shipment that did not successfully wave. That's why I'm going to show you how you use inventory statuses to control when things get released to the warehouse. Okay? Okay. Now, before I move into mobile device menu items, I want to talk about wave templates. Okay? We didn't talk about this on the inbound side because it's not relevant to inbound. It's only relevant to outbound processing. And what a wave is a grouping of shipments to be processed in the warehouse. Okay? So you've got this big group of shipments that you're going to process in the warehouse. Now, the question when you're setting these up ultimately is how should I configure these? Right? What's the right way to set this up for my warehouse? So I'll go under Setup, Waves, Wave Templates. And I'm going to look at 24 shipping default. Notice there's different types of waves. We've got the shipping wave, production orders, Kanban. We're going to focus on shipping, which includes both transfer orders and sales orders. Okay. So when looking at this, the first thing I want to talk about is the steps in the lower left-hand corner. What we're saying here is what functions do we want to have take place when we process a wave. Okay. In our example, we're going to create loads. Okay. So this is a good time to talk about what a load is versus a shipment versus a wave. A wave is a grouping of shipments to be processed in the warehouse. A load is a grouping of shipments to be put on a truck. A shipment is a delivery address. So where a stop for that truck. Okay? So if I can group them together, you may have a one-to-one relationship between load and shipment. You may have a many-to-one. Just depends on the business, right? But the first thing we're going to do is create that load. After we've created the load, we're going to allocate the wave. That allocate wave process is going out and looking at the location directives to see if I have enough inventory in the right locations to get this out the door. Okay? That's where it looks at those location directives. I'm going to come back to replenish later, but that's an additional step you can put in there. It's optional. But once it's allocated that wave, it'll create work. Okay? So after it's figured out where it has to go, it tells us what the steps are to get it out of that location and to the packing station or the bay door. Okay? So in this case, we've also included replenishment. I'm going to come back to that later, but I next want to move on to some other options that we see here. As you know, I mean, I'm sure you know, there's a lot of ways to run a warehouse, right? You can group orders together on a wave. You can, and then pick by that wave. You can do order-based picking to say, you know, just go pick everything for one order at a time and then get it out to the door for the FedEx truck to take it, you know, whatever. These check boxes over here control that. Okay? These are your controllers for how the system should behave when it comes to grouping shipments into a wave. If I set it up like this, what I'm saying here is that as soon as a warehouse, or excuse me, as soon as a shipment or where an order is released to the warehouse, go ahead and automatically create the wave, automatically process the wave. Processing goes through these steps at the bottom of the screen, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And after that's done, release the wave, which unblocks the work so my warehouse workers can actually go get the stuff, right? That's now a one-to-one relationship between sales order and wave. Okay? It's order picking. If I want to do some grouping, I can do it in a number of ways. I could do this. I could say, don't do anything manually. Or excuse me, don't do anything automatically. Have the warehouse manager do everything manually. He's going to select what waves are going out today, or excuse me, what shipments are going out today. He's going to create the wave. It's going to create the work. And it's going to get out the door, right? Or you could do some automation, but do some groupings. I could say automate wave creation, assign to open waves, which says if there's already a wave out there that hasn't been released yet, hasn't been processed yet, and meets my selection criteria, then go ahead and assign the order to that wave. And then I could say process wave automatically at threshold. Okay. The threshold is defined up here in the upper right-hand corner. Okay. So in my example, what I've said is I've got a line threshold of 4. So for every 4 shipment lines, I will have a separate wave. You know, a more real-world example might be every 100 shipment lines, right? Every 100 shipments. Maybe it's a wave threshold based on the equipment that's required for picking purposes. Okay? So there's a lot of ways you can approach that. In our example, we're going to do this. We're going to automatically create the wave, assign to open waves, and process the wave. And then there's the automate wave release option, which essentially unblocks the work so that workers can go perform the picks and the puts and get it out the door. Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about some mobile device menu item setup. Yes. So I believe the question was, is there any logic? Yeah, these methods are embedded in the code, right? So these are all the standard methods, but if you created a custom method, you could insert one in here and then control. That wouldn't be standard configuration, right? There is one standard configuration I neglected to mention, the make method repeatable option. If I have that marked, say I've marked that on replenishment, what that would do is allow me to insert multiple replenishment steps into my wave. Okay? which can tie to different wave templates, and the wave templates have different control features, so it can get fairly complex. But okay, yes.
I also noticed that you purposely did not put containerization.
Right. Right. So there's also the remaining method, containerization. What containerization does is it looks at the physical dimensions of your items and looks at your containerization setup with physical dimensions and comes out and says, well, if I'm going to ship 100 widgets, I need these specific containers. And the logic for that is based on height, width, length, and then it can turn on one axis. So it can turn on the z-axis, I believe, to see if it'll fit in the container. Okay, so there's a bunch of logic embedded there. If you want to use that, you can by inserting that method name. Okay, so let's look at mobile device menu items. Okay, so I'm going to look at some specific mobile device menu items. I'm going to look at sales picking, and this is the way I've configured it, right? There's a ton of ways you can configure this thing, right? I've got my mode work, first of all. It can be either work or indirect. Most of what you're going to do is going to be work, and then the question becomes, are you going to use existing work, or are you going to create work? Okay, so use existing work means make use of work that was created by some other process. Okay? If I'm doing an outbound process where I'm processing waves, one of the steps is to create work, right? So this would be set as use existing work for outbound. However, if I look at, say, transfer receive, that's work, but it's not using existing work, it's creating work. Okay? So now I choose what is the work creation process that gets triggered when I do a transfer order receive. Okay. Now there's a number of different ways that you can control the way the system behaves or what the user has to do in order to get their work put in front of them. We're using system grouping for our demo, but you can also use system directed. System grouping means the user is going to tell me something, right? And then the system's going to go find work that applies to that something. Right? System directed means the user's not going to tell me anything. The system's just going to go find all the work that's tied to the work class IDs listed here. Okay? And these are set on my work template. Okay? And then it will sort them based on how I have system to work sorting set in the system directed work button at the top of the screen, which is only available when I choose system directed. Okay? I could also do user directed or user grouping. User directed means the user is going to specify what work ID they're working on, right? So we're going to print out some paper, send it out to the floor. They're going to pick up a piece of paper, scan the work ID, do the work, be done with it. Okay? User grouping means they're going to pick up a list of work IDs, scan 1, 2, 3, 4 work IDs, do all 4 of them, be done with them. Okay? And then a few other ones. Cluster picking is a unique outbound function we're not covering today. Cycle count grouping, cycle counting, and then validated user directed just forces the user to validate a few things. From an outbound standpoint, there's also this concept called anchoring. Okay? So imagine I'm splitting my work up by zone in my warehouse, right? I've got work ID 1, 2, 3 and work ID 4, 5, 6. They're both for the same order. They're both for the same shipment. But I have 2 workers working on it because they're in 2 different zones, right? Well, if it says deliver to packing station 1, if the worker decides, no, I'm going to deliver this to packing station 2 and overrides it, sets it to packing station 2, do we want that to automatically change the other worker's work ID to go to packing station 2? Okay? That's what this anchoring function does. It essentially says, well, redirect that other work ID to the new location based on either shipment or load. Okay. Correct, yes. Yes, because those two shipments, because those two work IDs are tied to the same shipment or load, it's going to direct all of them to the same packing station or bay door. Okay. Okay, and we also have the audit template ID. Okay, so we're going to cover audit templates in a little bit. Let's just get into it now. Basically, what we do with an audit template is we define additional steps, additional things that we want to have happen when a certain set of criteria takes place. Okay? So we're saying if a worker is picking using this mobile device menu item, then we want to trigger the ship work audit template. Okay? We're going to trigger based on load. You can choose load or shipment here. We're going to trigger, we can either trigger based on prior, completion, or status change. Okay? The idea behind the work audit template that I'm doing here is that I want to automatically update the status of my load to shipped as soon as it's fully loaded. Okay? So what I'm saying here, and a load is fully loaded at the point that all the inventory associated with it has been delivered to the bay door. Okay? So what this is going to do is it's going to say, as soon as the status changes to loaded, then trigger the following. Do an event that confirms the shipment and print the bill of lading. Okay? Now, something to make note of on this. Okay? Right now, it's not working with system directed, okay, which is a pretty big problem, right? But we're working on that. That should be actually resolved in the next week or two. There'll be a hotfix released for it. So just kind of know that. It'll be on LCS soon. Excuse me. Okay. So that's our mobile device menu setup. And now that we've defined that, let's go ahead and step through and see what happens. Okay, so we're going to do a little demo. I didn't need to bring up that slide just to tell you I was doing a demo. But. All right. So the first thing we need to do is get some sales orders, right? So let's go ahead and create a few sales orders. And I'm actually, for the sake of time, I'm going to go to my wave template. I'm going to lower this value to 2 just to make it happen quicker. All right, so I'm going to ship 1, 2, 0, 0, 2. Yeah, please.
Why are we not seeing this in the new AX and it's in R3?
Why are you not seeing warehouse management in the new AX? I'm not sure. We don't.
Every other session has been pretty dynamic.
Oh, for this session, this was specifically put out as a 20. Yeah.
Okay, but this is all available in Dynamics.
Yeah, this is all available in AX7. It's just this session was positioned as a 2012 session. Okay, so we got that first order. Okay. So we've got 3 orders in the system to different customers. If we refresh this screen, we see that we have 2 going to US 2 and 1 going to US 3 as our wholesale. 1 Contosa Retail LA, 1 to Forest Wholesales. Okay. And I'm going to just copy this order number for future use. Now, what we need to understand about this process is what's going to happen based on availability of inventory. So let's just go take a look at what's on hand for our items. Okay, let's look at what's on hand here. Well, we have inventory on hand and available. Well, let's take a look at the status. It's all in this receipt status, right? So the reason for that, if you were at the earlier sessions, what you would have seen is that we configured the system to purposely put inventory into the receipt status if it's at the receiving location or if it's just been put away. Okay? The reason we're doing that is we don't want the system to create shipments without being able to waive them. Okay? So I only want the shipment to get generated if it can successfully waive. Now, not all companies will want to do that, but for this company, I'm saying that they do. Okay? In order for us to successfully waive these, the status is going to have to change. So let's just take a look at what happens here. If I go to Warehouse Management, the way I'm going to release my orders in this case is through a periodic batch job. I'm going to go under Periodic Automatic Release of Sales Orders. I'm going to release Physical Reserved only. I'm not going to allow partials. I'm not worrying about fulfillment rates. Fulfillment rate is an option that you have that basically says, if a customer doesn't want to allow partial shipment unless it's at least a certain percentage, you can set a fulfillment rate. Excuse me. But I'm going to select based on my orders. I'm just going to say only orders that are greater than 760. And click OK. And now, normally, in a real world scenario, this would be set up to run periodically every, few hours, a couple times a day, once a day, whatever makes sense for the business, right? But I'm going to go ahead and run it. And it didn't return anything. Yeah? It didn't create any work, so the order shouldn't be released to the warehouse, right? Now, if those were sitting in a available status, they would. So look, the release status is open on all 3 of them, meaning they haven't been released to the warehouse. There has been no shipment created. Okay? In order to get them into the appropriate status, we're going to run another batch job that would be set up to run periodically, typically prior to your release to warehouse process. So I'll process the inventory status change job. And I'm going to say set everything that isn't in receiving or one of the quality locations to available. Okay? And now it's taking a little longer because it's actually going out and releasing the stuff to the warehouse, processing it, and creating work. So now if I look at those sales orders, they're still in an open status. Let's just go take a look where the inventory resides. Okay, this is all the status of available. And let's just make sure our inventory transaction, our sales order has a status of available on it. Perhaps I set something on it up incorrectly. Oh, thank you. I'm a little under the weather today. I'm going to make that excuse. So I'm going to go, yeah, I never ran the release yet. Under warehouse management, periodic, yeah, I ran this. Automatic release of sales orders. I did. Oh, there. Okay, so I did something out of order. Anyway. No, yeah, you're right. I ran it the first time. I didn't run it the second time. So when I look at this, what's happened here is it's gone out and it said, okay, we can reserve this inventory, but we cannot fully allocate these shipments. Now, one thing to make note of, no work was created for this shipment, okay, but we did create some work for these shipments, and we removed them from the wave. So when we look at this, the reason that we're not going to be able to do this, whenever you see this, that's an indication that the inventory isn't in the right location based on your location directives, right? But if you want to see the details, you can click on the last one on the list. See how it says see the work creation history log for details? And you can click on work creation history log, and it shows you everything that it tried to do. The work template succeeded. Certain things didn't work. So let's take a look here. If we look at those sales orders, this one's released. 761 and 762 are released, but 760 is not. Okay? Now the reason for that is that 760 got dropped off because it couldn't be allocated. 761 and 762 got allocated. If we look under warehouse management and look at our load details, we'll see if we have a load. There we see we have a shipment ID. If we look at our work on it, there's no work. Okay? So this is what's going to happen if you don't have things set up properly in the system, right? You're going to end up with shipments in the system that you need to manage. So let's go take a look at those. If I go to my warehouse management module and just go to shipments, all shipments, the way you manage these is you simply delete them. It's these two. They're now gone. So now the status of the orders will be open again. Yes, and they are open. Okay, so let's make it work. Let's get the replenishment template set up so that we can create our replenishments and get inventory where it needs to be. So let's look at this. What do we got? US2, we have 10 pieces, right, of A0001. Now we have A0002 for 5 and A0001 for 3. So I need 13 of A0001 and 5 of A0002. So let's take a look at those items. If we look at our dimension display by location and status, we can see what's available. What we really need is enough inventory in CP001. So that should work in theory. Because if we look under warehouse management setup, CP001 is a fixed location for this item. So I have plenty in that fixed location. However, we also have A002, and it's available at CP002 and CP005, right? A002 has fixed locations, CP002. So that should behave correctly. So let's go look at those location directives and make sure they're right. So we need to check here. It's not an INET order. Well, that's probably why. Okay. So let's look at this. I changed this to only fixed locations for the product, but I also had a selection criteria that says location profile floor. My CP locations have location profile web shop, so this fails. Okay? So let's take a look again. I'm going to remove this. We'll process that again. Okay. The query that the question was the query that I showed under location directives. This query, is that a fixed query was the question. And it's a fixed, I'm on the wrong line, excuse me. The query here is in addition to the fixed location usage option. Okay, so it's saying not only am I restricting to fixed locations, I'm also restricting to other stuff in this edit query form. Yes. At the top level, we're saying at the top level, the edit query is for specific orders, right? At the action level, the edit query is for specific locations. Okay? So you're saying what orders apply at the location directive level, and you're saying what locations apply at the location directive action level. But we did successfully get some work now. So if I go take a look, we see that it created two shipments, 106 and 107, for 3 orders. Okay, I had 3 orders, but 2 shipments. The reason I had 2 shipments is that 2 of those orders went to the same customer. Okay? And I had the checkbox marked to do some consolidation. Okay? As a result, I've had work created. So if I go under warehouse management, work, open sales work, I see that it's created some additional work for me. USMF1 and USMF2. Oh, I'm sorry, I created USMF 256. Okay, so I have one work ID to pull 3 and then 5 and deliver them both to pack. Okay, notice that I have 3 of A0001, 5 of A0002, and we're delivering to pack. Okay. So now that I have that, once again, if we look at that work, we can use that, we can use our mobile device menu item to pick it. We're going to do that through our Internet Explorer. So I'm going to cancel out of here, go to my main menu, go to Outbound, and go to Sales Picking. And because I chose System Grouping, it's asking me to scan my zone, which in my case is actually the work pool ID. And because I've done that, it says, okay, you've got one work ID within that zone. What is your license plate that you're picking from? I don't know off the top of my head, so I'm going to cheat. Now, in the real world, obviously, this would just be printed on the license plate itself, so I wouldn't have to do this. But there we see our license plate 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now notice that it's prompting me to create a target license plate. Okay, the reason it's doing that is that I'm only pulling part of this license plate. There's more inventory on license plate 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Any one license plate can only reside in one location. Okay, so I'm going to call it target 01, and the LP next one that I'm going to pull one, 2, 3, 4, 6. And we're going to put them down. It says the work is completed. Now I can scan my zone again. Now if I had more work, it would show up here, but I haven't. I don't, so it doesn't show up. Okay. So that's what happens if I have enough work. Now what it did, enough inventory for it at the pick locations. What it did is it created work to put it at the packing station. So let's go see what the status of our order is now. Excuse me. All right. So we've got our sales orders. They're both still in a status of released. If I go under warehouse management and look at my shipments, look at my work, I see that the work is closed and the inventory is at pack. Okay? So now that I have that inventory at the packing station, I need to actually pack it. Okay? That's done through my packing form. And there's a lot of setup behind this that I'm not going to dive into today, but there are several blog posts that cover it in detail. So if we go under warehouse management, common pack, and we choose our worker, I'm just going to choose Jody Christensen, and I'm going to choose a packing profile. And this is some of the setup that we have to do. I have one for warehouse 24. And the first thing I can do is scan my license plate or my shipment. So I'm going to go ahead and scan my license plate, which I think is target 01. And that target license plate is now sitting there, and I need to create a container. That's obviously wrong. I'm going to paste my shipment in there. No, my shipment ID was okay. I've got two shipments in packing. I'll do number 106. Okay. So the first thing I have to do is create a container. Now I could set it up to automatically generate containers for me. That's part of the container, the packing profile setup. But I'm going to go ahead and create a new container by clicking New. And the container ID isn't defaulting for me because I didn't set it up to do that, but I'll just call it JR Container 01. And now I tell it what I'm putting in the box. Now I've got an open container, and I can tell it what I'm putting in the box by having my cursor on the identifier field and just simply scanning the item ID. And as I do that, notice that the packed quantity is going up and the remaining quantity is going down. If I want to just pack the remaining quantity, I would enter the quantity first. And now it's fully packed. Okay. So I've now created a container for this, and I need to close the container to say that it's on the truck. So I'm going to say close the container. I'm going to give it a weight. If I said get system weight and I had a scale attached, that would work, but I don't, so I'll just enter a weight and click OK. And now the status of the shipment is loaded. Okay. So this shipment is now loaded. Now notice it didn't move to a status of shipped. Okay, the reason for that is I went through the packing station to get it to a status of loaded. Had I delivered the shipment to the bay door instead of gone through the packing station, it would have triggered the audit template ID and the status would have moved to shipped and the bill of lading would have printed. Okay. Okay, so we've got a couple minutes left. If I look at, I just want to take you through replenishment briefly, demand replenishment. So if we go under demand replenishment, under setup, one of the key setups that we have under replenishment, we have replenishment templates. And we're looking at demand replenishment. One of the key things to make note of is this wave step code. Okay? This is the way we tie this replenishment template to our wave template. Okay? So if we go back to our wave template, notice that that wave step code on replenish is 1. Okay? So I'm saying this replenishment process applies to this replenishment template. Okay. Now notice that I'm assigning a replenishment unit here. Okay, I'm assigning a replenishment unit of max because what I want to have happen is I want it to go out and replenish up to the defined maximum stocking level for my fixed locations. Okay? That's why I created that unit of measure called max. Now what that allows me to do is on A0001 and A0002, set a max stocking limit of 1 max and have unit conversions that defines what that maximum is. Okay? And we are pretty much out of time, and I'm sorry for that. So what I'm going to say to you is that there is a blog post out here that goes through essentially everything I just went through. So if you go and just search on AX support blog demand replenishment, the first thing it should return is this. Okay. And then you can click on the link and it'll take you to that blog post. Okay. So this would be worth taking a look at. It goes through a lot of the stuff that we just covered, including showing how the demand replenishment actually flows through and you complete those replenishment steps. Okay. Okay. Questions? Yes? Is it possible to put the load after the... Oh. So the question is it possible to complete all of your picking activities and then create your load after that's done? So I would imagine everything's going to a staging location. Based on what's in staging, you create your load. There is a function, I haven't done it, but there is a function on your load, on your shipments, excuse me, that allows you to transfer to a new load. So you could have the wave processing step create a load and then transfer your shipments to the new load. I don't know that that would be the most ideal approach, but that may work for you. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know that there's going to be a good solution for that problem right now. Yes? With the system grouping, the worker does not have to scan the zone every time. It will feed them everything within that zone that needs to be done. after they scan it once. No, I am not familiar with the Russian localization for G. Yeah, sorry. Other questions? Yes. The question was, can you make the packing task with the mobile device? The short answer to that is no. There is no way to do a packing function with the mobile device outside of containerization, which does require pre-creating the containers based on size, etc. Can the license plate number be generated with a number sequence? Yes, and that's defined on your mobile device menu item. There's a checkbox that says generate license plate. Other questions? Okay, thank you. I appreciate you guys coming.